Marcus Williams pushed his cleaning cart down the gleaming marble hallway of Technova Industries' 47th floor, the wheels squeaking slightly against the polished surface. At 52, his calloused hands had cleaned these same corridors for 7 years, invisible to the suited executives who rushed past him daily. The late evening shift was his preference. Fewer people meant fewer reminders of how different his world was from theirs. "Damn it, Rodriguez! We've been stuck on this for 3 weeks!" The voice boomed from the corner office, CEO Jonathan Mitchell's distinctive baritone cutting through the quiet floor. Marcus instinctively slowed his pace, not wanting to interrupt whatever crisis was unfolding behind those glass walls. Through the transparent office partition, he could see Mitchell pacing frantically, his $3,000 suit wrinkled from stress. Around the massive conference table sat 5 of the company's top software engineers, their faces illuminated by the blue glow of multiple laptops. Coffee cups and energy drink cans littered the surface, evidence of another all-nighter. "Sir, we've tried every approach," came the tired voice of Sarah Rodriguez, the lead engineer. "The encryption is unlike anything we've encountered. It's like whoever designed this anticipated every conventional method we'd use." Marcus had always been good with puzzles. As a kid in Detroit, while other children played video games, he'd spent hours with crosswords, Sudoku, and brain teasers his grandmother brought home from the library where she worked. Even now, during his lunch breaks, he'd work through puzzle books, his mind craving the satisfaction of solving something complex. "This client is offering us $12 million for this project," Mitchell continued, his voice rising. $12 million, and we can't crack a simple security code? What am I paying you people for?" Marcus paused his cleaning, pretending to focus on a scuff mark on the floor while straining to hear more. On the massive wall-mounted screen, he could make out lines of code, numbers, and symbols arranged in patterns that seemed chaotic to most, but to Marcus, there was something familiar about the structure. "It's not simple, Mr. Mitchell," Rodriguez replied, exhaustion evident in her voice. "This is military-grade encryption. We're talking about months of work, maybe longer. The client needs it by Friday." "Friday?" Mitchell's laugh was bitter. "That's 4 days away, 4 days to crack what's basically digital Fort Knox." Marcus found himself studying the screen more intently. The pattern reminded him of something, a logic puzzle he'd solved years ago in one of his grandmother's old books. The way the numbers cascaded, the repetition of certain symbols. It wasn't random at all. "What if we tried a different approach?" suggested David Park, one of the younger engineers. "Maybe brute force isn't the answer here." "We've tried everything except consulting a psychic," Mitchell snapped. "At this point, I'd double the paycheck of anyone who could solve this mess. Hell, I'd triple it if they could do it by Friday." The room fell silent except for the hum of computers and the distant sound of Marcus's cart. He knew he should move on, continue his cleaning route, mind his own business like he had for 7 years. But something about those patterns on the screen nagged at him, like a song stuck in his head that he couldn't quite remember. "You know what?" Mitchell's voice took on a mocking tone as he noticed Marcus lingering outside. "Maybe we should ask the janitor. At least he'd give us fresh perspective." The engineers glanced up, some smiling politely at what they assumed was their boss's attempt at stress relief humor. Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks, the familiar sting of being the punchline to someone else's joke. "Actually," Mitchell continued, walking to the glass door and sliding it open, his voice carrying that condescending tone Marcus knew all too well. "Hey there, Marcus, right? You've been listening to our little crisis. What do you think? If you can solve this code, I'll double your paycheck." The laughter that followed from some of the engineers felt like ice water in Marcus's veins. Not all of them laughed. Rodriguez looked uncomfortable, and Park seemed genuinely embarrassed by his boss's behavior, but the damage was done. 7 years of being invisible, and now he was visible for all the wrong reasons. "I'm sorry, Mr. Mitchell," Marcus said quietly, his voice steady despite the humiliation burning in his chest. "I didn't mean to eavesdrop. I was just cleaning." "Of course you were," Mitchell said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "That's what you do, right? Clean up other people's messes?" Something in Mitchell's tone, the casual cruelty, the assumption that Marcus was nothing more than his uniform, sparked something deep inside him. His grandmother's voice echoed in his memory. "Marcus, baby, smart comes in all kinds of packages. Don't you ever let anyone make you feel small because they can't see past the wrapping." Marcus looked past Mitchell to the screen, and suddenly the pattern clicked. It wasn't just encryption. It was a puzzle within a puzzle, a mathematical sequence disguised as random code. The designer had hidden the key in plain sight, using a technique he'd seen in advanced logic problems. Actually, Marcus heard himself saying, his voice stronger now, I think I might know what that is. The laughter died instantly. Mitchell's eyebrows shot up, his expression shifting from amusement to surprise to something that looked almost like annoyance, that his joke wasn't landing the way he'd expected. Excuse me? Mitchell said, his voice flat. Marcus felt every eye in the room on him. Rodriguez leaned forward slightly, her expression curious rather than mocking. Park had stopped typing entirely. The moment stretched between them, loaded with 7 years of invisibility, decades of being underestimated, and the sudden, terrifying possibility that maybe, just maybe, this was his moment to be seen. The pattern on your screen, Marcus said, stepping closer to the doorway but not presuming to enter. It's not random encryption, it's a logic sequence. The designer embedded the key in the mathematical progression itself. The silence that followed was deafening. Tell us, what city or country are you watching this story from? It's always incredible to know how far these narratives reach. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears as 5 of the most brilliant minds in Silicon Valley stared at him with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright skepticism. CEO Jonathan Mitchell's face had gone through several emotions in the span of seconds: surprise, confusion, and now something that looked suspiciously like irritation that his joke had taken an unexpected turn. I'm sorry, what did you just say? Mitchell's voice carried that particular tone Marcus had heard countless times before, the tone people used when they thought someone was getting above their station. Marcus swallowed hard, but Rodriguez's encouraging nod gave him the courage to continue. The code on your screen, it's not just encryption, it's a nested logic puzzle. The key isn't hidden from the sequence, it is the sequence. David Park leaned back in his chair, his expression shifting from embarrassment to genuine interest. What do you mean by that? May I? Marcus gestured toward the screen, and after a moment's hesitation, Mitchell stepped aside with an exaggerated sweep of his arm, as if indulging a child who wanted to play with the grown-ups' toys. Marcus approached the massive display, his cleaning uniform feeling more conspicuous than ever against the backdrop of suits and cutting-edge technology. But as he studied the code more closely, his discomfort faded. This was familiar territory, the realm of patterns and logic where his mind had always felt most at home. Look here, Marcus pointed to a series of numbers in the third line. 47, 23, 11, 5. Everyone sees prime numbers in descending order, right? But watch what happens when you apply the Fibonacci sequence to the gaps. His finger traced across the screen as he spoke, and Marcus was dimly aware that he'd never felt more confident in his life. The difference between 47 and 23 is 24. Between 23 and 11 is 12. Between 11 and 5 is 6. Each gap is exactly half the previous one. Sarah Rodriguez sat up straighter, her fatigue momentarily forgotten. That's actually elegant. But how does that help us decrypt the entire system? Because whoever designed this knew that most people would focus on the numbers themselves, not the relationships between them. Marcus continued, his voice gaining strength. But every third line follows this same halving pattern, just with different starting points. Lines 3, 6, 9, 12, they're all keys disguised as decoration. The room had gone completely quiet except for the soft clicking of keyboards as Park began inputting Marcus's observations. On his laptop screen, numbers began rearranging themselves, and suddenly patterns that had seemed random started making sense. Holy shit, Park whispered, then immediately looked embarrassed by his language. Sorry, this is actually working. Mitchell's expression had shifted from condescending amusement to something much more complex. Wait, you're telling me that my janitor, no offense, Marcus, just figured out something my team of MIT and Stanford graduates couldn't crack in 3 weeks? With respect, sir, Rodriguez interjected, her tone carefully professional but with an edge. Intelligence isn't exclusive to people with expensive degrees. Marcus felt a flush of gratitude toward the lead engineer, but his attention was already back on the screen. There's more, he said, pointing to another section. The symbols between the number sequences, they're not random either. They're positional markers. See how every symbol that appears next to a prime number gap is rotated 45 degrees from its base form. My God, breathed Jennifer Chen, one of the senior developers who'd been quiet until now. It's like a 3-dimensional puzzle flattened into 2 dimensions. The rotation tells us which layer of encryption we're looking at. The energy in the room had completely transformed. What had started as an all-night crisis session filled with frustration and dead ends, had suddenly become something electric with possibility. Laptops hummed as the team began implementing Marcus's insights, their fingers flying across keyboards with renewed purpose. "Marcus," Rodriguez said, turning to face him directly, "where did you learn to think like this?" Marcus felt heat creep up his neck. I've always been good with puzzles, I guess. My grandmother used to bring home these logic books from the library where she worked. I'd spend hours on them." He paused, looking around the room at faces that were no longer dismissive but genuinely interested. "I never went to college, though. Couldn't afford it." "College doesn't teach you to see patterns like this," Park said firmly. "This is pure intuitive reasoning. You've got a gift, man." Mitchell stood off to the side, his arms crossed, watching the interaction with an expression Marcus couldn't quite read. The CEO's earlier mockery had evaporated, replaced by something that looked almost like calculation. "How long have you been working here, Marcus?" Mitchell asked suddenly. 7 years, sir." 7 years, Mitchell repeated slowly. "And in all that time, you never thought to mention that you could solve complex logic problems?" The question hung in the air like an accusation, and Marcus felt his old insecurities rushing back. "Nobody ever asked, sir. And besides, I'm just the janitor." "It's not like anyone would have listened." "Well, someone's listening now," Rodriguez said pointedly, giving Mitchell a look that suggested she wasn't impressed with her boss's handling of the situation. The main screen suddenly flashed green, and a series of previously locked directories appeared. Park let out a whoop of excitement. "We're in!" "Marcus, your pattern recognition just cracked their primary firewall. We still have 3 more layers to go," Chen added, studying her screen intently. "But this is further than we've gotten in weeks." Mitchell walked slowly to the window, his hands clasped behind his back, staring out at the city lights of San Francisco Bay. When he turned back to the room, his expression was unreadable. "Marcus," he said finally, "I believe I made you a promise about doubling your paycheck." Marcus felt his breath catch. "Mr. Mitchell, I was just trying to help. I don't expect—" "A promise is a promise," Mitchell interrupted, but his tone suggested this conversation was far from over. "Though I suspect we're going to need to have a much longer talk about your future here." The weight of those words settled over Marcus like a blanket, warm with possibility, but heavy with the uncertainty of change. After 7 years of invisibility, he was suddenly, unmistakably seen. If this story is touching you in some way, comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Every place has its own struggles, and sometimes it's incredible to see how we all connect through such human stories. 3 days had passed since Marcus cracked the first layer of encryption, and the Technova building felt different to him now. The same marble hallways, the same glass offices, but the invisible barrier that had separated him from this world for 7 years had begun to crack along with the code. "Marcus, over here!" Sarah Rodriguez called out as he pushed his cleaning cart past the conference room. It was 2 a.m. and the core team was still working, fueled by takeout containers and the adrenaline of being so close to solving the $12 million puzzle. He'd been splitting his time between his regular janitorial duties and helping with the encryption project. Mitchell had made it clear that his cleaning responsibilities couldn't be neglected. "We can't have the board thinking I'm paying a janitor to play computer games," he'd said with that smile that never quite reached his eyes. "We're stuck on layer 3, David Park explained as Marcus approached. His laptop screen showed a maze of interconnected symbols that seemed to shift and dance in patterns that hurt to look at directly. "It's like the deeper we go, the more the system adapts to our solutions." Marcus studied the display, noting how different this layer was from the previous ones. Where the first 2 had been elegant puzzles with clear mathematical relationships, this one felt almost alive, predatory. "It's learning from our previous attempts," Marcus said slowly. "Look at how the pattern shifts every time you input a potential key. It's not just encrypted, it's defensive." Jennifer Chen looked up from her workstation, her eyes bloodshot from staring at code for hours. "How do you fight something that adapts to every move you make?" "You don't fight it," Marcus replied, his grandmother's voice echoing in his memory from countless evenings spent over puzzle books. "You make friends with it. You show it you're not a threat." "Make friends with code?" Park laughed, but it wasn't dismissive. Over the past 3 days, the team had learned to take Marcus's unconventional thinking seriously. "Think about it," Marcus continued, pulling up a chair, something that still felt strange and wonderful after 7 years of standing on the periphery. "What if instead of trying to break through, we try to join the conversation?" Rodriguez leaned forward, intrigued. "What do you mean?" Marcus pointed to a section where the symbols seemed to pulse in a regular rhythm. Watch the timing. It's not random, it's responsive. The system is trying to communicate, not just defend. What if we respond in kind? The next hour passed in intense collaboration. Marcus found himself at the center of discussions that would have been incomprehensible to him a week ago, but now felt as natural as breathing. The team implemented his suggestion, creating a responsive algorithm that mirrored the system's communication patterns rather than attacking them. "It's working," Chen whispered, as new directories began unlocking themselves. "The system it's actually showing us the way through." They were so absorbed in their breakthrough that none of them noticed Jonathan Mitchell standing in the doorway until he cleared his throat. "Impressive work," Mitchell said, though his tone was carefully neutral. "Marcus, I need to speak with you privately." The words sent a chill through Marcus's chest. In his experience, being called to speak privately with a boss rarely ended well. He followed Mitchell to his corner office, hyper-aware of how his cleaning uniform contrasted with the CEO's perfectly pressed shirt and tie, even at this late hour. "Sit down, Marcus," Mitchell said, settling behind his massive mahogany desk. "We need to discuss your situation here." Marcus remained standing. "Is there a problem with my work, sir? Because I've been keeping up with all my cleaning duties and—" "Your cleaning duties?" Mitchell's laugh was short and humorless. "Marcus, in the past 3 days, you've contributed more to this company's success than some people do in years. Do you really think I'm concerned about whether you've emptied the waste baskets?" The question hung in the air between them. Marcus wasn't sure if it was rhetorical or if Mitchell actually expected an answer. "The client is thrilled with our progress," Mitchell continued. "We're ahead of schedule, and it's largely thanks to your unique perspective. That presents me with an interesting dilemma." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. "Sir, I can't have a janitor solving problems that my engineering team couldn't handle. It raises uncomfortable questions about our hiring practices, our compensation structures, our entire organizational philosophy." Mitchell leaned back in his chair, studying Marcus with the calculating look he'd worn 3 days ago. "On the other hand, I can't afford to lose someone with your abilities to a competitor." "I'm not going anywhere, Mr. Mitchell. This job is beneath you," Mitchell interrupted. "We both know that now. The question is, what do we do about it?" Marcus felt like he was standing at the edge of a cliff, with no idea what lay at the bottom. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm offering you a position on the engineering team. Junior level, of course. We can't have people thinking we're promoting janitors willy-nilly, but it would come with a significant pay increase and the opportunity to work on projects that actually utilize your skills. It should have been everything Marcus had never dared to dream of: recognition, respect, financial security. But something in Mitchell's tone made him wary. "What's the catch?" Marcus asked. Mitchell's smile was sharp. "Smart question. The catch is that this stays between us for now. We'll handle the transition quietly, maybe frame it as discovering hidden talent in our existing workforce. But Marcus," Mitchell's voice took on a harder edge, "you need to understand that this kind of opportunity comes with expectations, loyalty, discretion, the understanding that your success is tied to this company's success." Marcus thought about Rodriguez and Park, about the genuine respect and friendship that had developed over the past 3 days. He thought about his grandmother, who had always told him that when someone showed you who they really were, you should believe them. "And if I prefer to stay where I am?" Marcus asked quietly. Mitchell's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "Well, that would be unfortunate. Budget cuts are always a possibility, and janitorial services, well, they're not exactly essential to our core mission, are they?" The threat was delivered with the same casual tone Mitchell might use to comment on the weather, but Marcus heard it clearly. Accept the promotion on Mitchell's terms, or lose everything. Through the glass wall of the office, Marcus could see the engineering team still working, still believing that they were part of something meaningful. Rodriguez caught his eye and gave him an encouraging smile, unaware of the conversation taking place behind closed doors. Marcus realized that his moment of recognition had come with a price he wasn't sure he was willing to pay. Marcus stared at Mitchell's expectant face, the weight of 7 years pressing down on his shoulders. Through the glass wall, he could see Rodriguez working intently, Park sharing a joke with Chen despite their exhaustion, and for a moment, he felt the pull of that world, a place where his mind was valued, where he belonged. "I need time to think about it," Marcus said finally. Mitchell's smile tightened. "Of course, take the night. But Marcus, remember, opportunities like this don't come around twice." As Marcus left the office, He felt Rodriguez's concerned gaze following him. She'd clearly sensed something was wrong, but he couldn't bring himself to explain. How could he tell them that their breakthrough moment had become his personal nightmare? The next morning brought an unexpected visitor to the Technova building. Marcus was emptying trash bins on the 35th floor when the elevator opened to reveal a woman in her 60s, impeccably dressed, with the kind of confidence that suggested she owned whatever room she entered. "Excuse me," she said, approaching Marcus with a warm smile. "I'm looking for someone named Marcus Williams. I was told he might be working on this floor." "That's me, ma'am," Marcus replied, automatically straightening his posture. Something about her reminded him of his grandmother, not in appearance, but in the way she looked at him, like she saw the person beneath the uniform. "Wonderful. I'm Margaret Chen, Jennifer's mother. She's told me quite a lot about you." "Mrs. Chen extended her hand, and Marcus shook it, surprised by the firmness of her grip. "I was hoping we could chat for a few minutes." They found a quiet seating area near the elevator bank, and Mrs. Chen settled herself as if she had all the time in the world. "Jennifer tells me you've been instrumental in solving a very complex problem," she began. "She also mentioned that you never went to college." Marcus felt the familiar heat of embarrassment. "No, ma'am, couldn't afford it." "Neither could I," Mrs. Chen said simply. "Came to this country with nothing, worked 3 jobs to put myself through night school, and eventually built a software company that I sold for $47 million last year." Marcus's eyes widened. "You're Margaret Chen, Chen Tech Solutions." "Guilty as charged." Her smile was warm but sharp. "Which is why I wanted to talk to you. You see, Marcus, I know talent when I see it, and I also know what it looks like when that talent is being undervalued." Before Marcus could respond, his phone buzzed with a text from Rodriguez. "Emergency in the conference room. We need you now." Mrs. Chen noticed his distraction. "Go ahead, son. But here," she handed him a business card. "Call me when you're ready to discuss your future properly." Marcus rushed to the 47th floor to find chaos. The final layer of encryption had activated some kind of defense protocol, and every attempt to progress was being met with increasingly aggressive countermeasures. "It's like the system knows we're close," Park said, frustration evident in his voice. "Every time we try to implement your communication approach, it shuts us down harder." Marcus studied the screen, watching the patterns shift and adapt. Something about the defensive behavior reminded him of a scared animal, aggressive because it felt trapped. "What if it's not defending the data?" Marcus said slowly, "but protecting something else? What if there's something in this final layer that the system doesn't want us to find?" "Like what?" Chen asked. "Like evidence," Marcus replied, his mind racing. "What if whoever created this system embedded proof of something they didn't want discovered?" The room went quiet. Rodriguez looked troubled. "Marcus, are you suggesting our client isn't being entirely honest about what they want us to decrypt?" Before Marcus could answer, Mitchell's voice cut through the tension from the doorway. "I'm sure whatever it is, it's none of our concern. We're being paid to crack the code, not to question the contents." But Marcus was already working, his fingers flying over the keyboard with newfound urgency. If he was right, if there was something hidden in the final layer that someone desperately wanted to keep secret, then maybe this whole situation was bigger than a simple decryption job. "Marcus," Mitchell's voice carried a warning, "remember what we discussed about loyalty?" The final pattern suddenly clicked into place in Marcus's mind. It wasn't just a communication protocol, it was a confession. The system had been designed by someone who wanted to leave evidence of wrongdoing, but only for someone smart enough and persistent enough to find it. "Got it," Marcus whispered, and hit enter. The screen exploded with data. Financial records, email communications, evidence of massive fraud involving government contracts. The client wasn't trying to access their own secured data. They were trying to destroy evidence that could send them to prison for decades. "Jesus Christ," Park breathed, reading the files as they cascaded across the screen. This is huge." Mitchell's face had gone pale. "Shut it down now." "Sir?" Rodriguez looked confused. "I said shut it down," Mitchell snapped. "We are not getting involved in whatever this is." But Marcus was already copying the files to a secure drive, his movements quick and decisive. "Actually, Mr. Mitchell, I think we already are involved." "Marcus, don't do anything stupid," Mitchell warned, his earlier congeniality completely gone. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." "You're right," Marcus said, standing and pocketing the drive. "But I know who I'm dealing with now." He looked around the room at the faces of his colleagues. Rodriguez nodding encouragingly, Park and Chen looking uncertain but supportive. These people had seen his worth when no one else had. They'd treated him with respect when he was just a janitor, not because they wanted something from him, but because that's who they were. "Mr. Mitchell," Marcus said quietly, "I decline your job offer." "Then you're fired," Mitchell replied coldly. "Actually," Rodriguez interrupted, standing up, "if Marcus goes, I go too." "Same here," Park added, closing his laptop with a decisive snap. "And me," Chen said firmly. Mitchell looked around the room in disbelief as his entire team aligned themselves with the janitor he'd tried to manipulate. Marcus pulled out Mrs. Chen's business card and smiled. "Mr. Mitchell, I think I just got a better offer. And now that you've reached the end, tell us in the comments. Where are you watching from? Your presence matters. And your story does too." 6 months later, Marcus Williams sat in his new office at Chent Tech Solutions, watching the sunset over San Francisco Bay. The fraud case had made national headlines, and his role in exposing it had opened doors he'd never imagined possible. But the best part wasn't the corner office or the 6-figure salary. It was the framed photo on his desk. Him and his grandmother on the day she taught him that intelligence comes in all kinds of packages, and that the most important code to crack is the one that unlocks your own potential. Sometimes the janitor really does know best.